Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Abdurrahman Haji Usman. I'm an associate professor in English language teaching at State Islamic Institute of Ternate, North Maluku, Indonesia. Today, I would like to present the results of my research entitled Implementing Integrated Strategy to Improve Students' Speaking Skills. As we know that high quality of the students' learning outcomes is one of the purposes of teaching and learning of English in all levels of schools or educational institutions. And we know that every teacher, especially English teachers or lecturers, expect high quality of learning outcomes. And in this case, there are some reasons, some indicators or there are some efforts to get high level or high quality of learning outcomes. One of them is effective learning and teaching strategy. In this case, English learning and teaching strategy. And the fact is, in my institution, the students have low performance of English, especially speaking skills, and they have low scores, and also they are not highly motivated. And I myself did any reflection of my teaching, how far I have given good or best teaching treatments to my students. And I think this is a gap. Gap is called also a problem, and the problem needs solution. And one of the solution is by doing a research, and this research was done by me in the form of classroom action research. My research objectives are: first, to describe how integrated strategy is implemented in the teaching and learning process. The second one is to analyze how integrated strategy can improve students' speaking skills in the teaching and learning process. And the scope of the study and the significance are: first, the scope is dealing with speaking skill, and the second is English language teaching, and the third is integrated strategy. I mean that I do not talk about others, but only these three scopes. And the second one is significance of the study. Theoretically, the study was or is expected to give or to support the theory of English language teaching strategies, especially in speaking class. And the second is practically this research can give motivation to the students, to the teachers, to apply or implement integrated strategy to improve their students in English language skills ability, especially speaking skills. In doing this research, I deal with some references that became my theories in order to strengthen the research. And I deal with two kinds of references. First was previous relevant studies. I mean the same research in the same fields or the same research areas in terms of English language teaching, especially speaking skills. And then the second is was pertinent ideas. Dealing with pertinent ideas, I also dealt with some theories, and the theories were about communication and speaking, the nature of teaching, the nature of communication and speaking. Third was concept of teaching, method, technique, and strategy. The fourth was the role of strategy in the teaching of language, in this case English. And the fifth was effective language teaching strategy and effective language teacher. Sixth, characteristics of effective teaching. And seven, the nature of teaching speaking, as well as teaching integrated strategy, teaching speaking by using integrated strategy. Next, dealing with method of research or research method. I have told in the previous explanation that this research was dealt with classroom action research, and this was the design of this research at the time. And this research consists of 4 steps. First, out of the introductory or preliminary study. First, planning. Second, implementing. Third, observing. Fourth, reflecting. And planning was done after doing the preliminary study. After doing planning, I went to the next step in terms of implementing. I implemented the strategy of language teaching, in this case integrated strategy, in the form of cycling or cycles. At the time I did 2 cycles, or I implemented the strategy in 2 cycles. Why 2 cycles? Because the first cycle was not successful or did not meet the criteria of success. And after doing the reflection, in this reflection I did 3 activities. Synthesizing, in this case synthesizing, next analyzing, and then the third, synchronizing the results of the students' performance, whether performance dealing with their active involvement, or the students' performance in English after being tested or after being evaluated, that was showed by the students' scores, and they were matched to the criteria of success. Next, in terms of the planning, I did some activities. First, preparing some techniques in terms of the teaching strategy. I did a strategy. I prepared a strategy as the product of the research, in this case integrated strategy. Second, besides preparing the strategy, I prepared the media of teaching. And third, I prepared criteria of success. The criteria of success were not separated from the rules in my institution. And the first was planning and designing lesson plans for the speaking class. Those were the activities that were done by me in the first step of the cycles, or of the classroom action research, in this case planning. And the second one was implementing. In doing implementing or implementation stage or steps, I did some activities. First, I divided the students into group of 4, and then the groups were asked to do different activities both inside the class or outside the classroom. And the third was in doing outdoor activities, the students were asked to observe the environment of the campus, interview some lecturers, some students, some staff of language lab, library, and the administration staff, and then make a simulation of the religious activities, and fourth, demonstrates some kinds of practical prayer. I prepared some topics in the form of reading text. The students were asked to read and comprehend the reading text in different group. I made, for example, I did head counting. For example, 1, 2, 3, 4. I asked them to count head 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 in some groups, and then the first 1, 2, 3, 4, I gave them one text of reading, short text, and then the second was the other title or topics of the text, but still in the Islamic studies in the central theme, dealing, for example, with prayers. And then the fourth, and then after they comprehended the reading in the first step of the grouping, I asked them to make note or some notes in order to be explained after they were regrouped into the other activities. I gave them only 15 minutes to comprehend the reading text, and then after that I asked them to move to the other groups. For the students who say one, there were 3, 5, and 6 of the students saying 1, 2, 3, 4. After that, they were asked to explain what they have learned in the previous groups to their friends in the new groups, and then they were asked to take notes, and then they were asked to present one by one. In those activities, there were 4 skills that were involved in the time. Reading skill were employed or were involved in that activity because they were asked to read text, and then writing, they were asked to write some notes. It means that I asked them to write, or I practice them, I train them to be good writers. They have to make a simple notes in order to train them to ask them to practice how to write well. And then listening, after they read and then they write in the first group or the first session of the grouping, they will move to the next grouping, and then they were asked to explain what they have learned in the previous groups. Yes, and then after that they explain. When the others were explaining, the others were listening. It means that there were 2 language skills involved in one moment of teaching. So if we accumulate them, there were 4 language skills were taught in one moment of teaching. In this case, listening, speaking, or reading and writing in the first activities of the groups, and then the second moment of the second step of the groups were listening and speaking. This was a strategy, and the students were highly motivated because they were guided by each other. They were guided by me as the teacher, and they were guided or given some input by their friends, and they were appreciated by me as the teacher or the lecturer. Next, in doing the research, in doing the teaching and implementing the strategy, I was observed in the process of implementing the strategy, I was observed by my collaborative teacher. I asked one lecturer of IAIN Ternate. At the time, I asked her, my collaborative teacher, to fill or to give a checklist in order to know the classroom atmosphere. I mean, this was observation step by using observation checklist or observation sheets. In this case, checklist. The checklist dealt with the students, how many students were active, were to ask questions, to give explanations, and so on. And then they were given scores, and the scores at the time have two kinds in the cycles of 1 and cycle 2, cycle 1 and cycle 2. Next, in observation checklist, observation step also, the data were collected or obtained to be analyzed by using quantitative way, or to analyze by using statistical way. Next, reflecting. In doing the reflection, I dealt with some activities. First, synthesizing. I collected all the data from the first meeting, second meeting. You know, each cycle consisted of 4 meetings, and each meeting has their own score, has their own score, especially in this classroom atmosphere, in the observation step, contributed by the collaborative teacher. After that, I went to the judgment. Next, I went to the techniques of collecting data and research instruments. I did some activities in the process of technique of collecting data, and the instruments that I used at the time. First, assessing the students' learning results, in this case by using test items as the instrument. Second, I deal with observation by observing the classroom atmosphere done by or performed or contributed by my friend as a collaborative teacher. And the third, in this observation way, I used observation sheet, in this case observation checklist. The third, recording students speaking performance as opposed to speaking activities by using tape recorder. And the fourth, documentation. I dealt with documentation in order to document the students' activities in the teaching and learning process by using camera as the instrument. Next, technique of data analysis or technique of analyzing data. Here, I dealt with some students' average scores in each cycle were accumulated. So the students' scores were accumulated in each cycle and then divided by 4, because 4 meeting for this students' average scores, in this case the scores of test results. And then I made in the form of percentage. And then the second one was the score of the students' active involvement, in this case in the process of observation by using observation sheet. All the scores in the observation steps were based on the active students, how many students were active at the time. The scores were accumulated and analyzed statistically. Next, third one was synchronization of the criteria of success and the results of the students' performance in speaking, both student scores of the test results and then the student scores of their active involvement. Next, criteria of success. Here I would like to explain that criteria of success is one of the ways to judge, is one of the ways, or one of the what instrument, or the ways and or instrument to judge the students based on their results in order to conclude whether the strategy implemented successful or not successful. First, I deal with two. First, the students could speak fluently. That is the criteria of success. The students must be able to speak fluently and accurately without hesitation and handicap. Then they got minimum average score of the speaking at least 80. 80 where was classified as good. I mean, this indicator was based on the standard of my institution, and then after being tested they have to get at least good with the score of 80. If they got less than 80, it means that they were not successful. And then second, the students were active, involved. I mean, the second criteria of the success of the implementation of the strategy was students' active involvement, whether in their meeting, their involvement in the first meeting, second meeting, third meeting, and all of the scores were accumulated and then divided by 4 in order to get the average score of the active involvement score. And the scores must be at least 71, categorized as high. Next, this is the research findings session. Based on my performance, my data, based on the implementation of the strategy, I got data. You know, I did the strategy, the teaching by using integrated strategy in 2 cycles. Why 2 cycles? I have told before that 2 cycles because the implementation of the strategy in the first cycle was not successful. Why? What indicators? The student scores of the final test of each cycle, or the cycle 1, did not meet the criteria of success of 80, my minimum good. And then the students' active involvement at the time were less than 71. In this case, only 33.68. Next, based on the students' low score at the time, I did a revision by doing some activities and by doing some steps. First, I changed in the revision step. I changed the time. I add the time from 15 to 20 and to 25 minutes to give the students to comprehend the text, and then I gave the students more time to present in their own expression and own context without hesitation. It means that the students must be freely presenting their materials or their ideas, not only dealing with the text textually but contextually. So they were free of hesitation and handicap. Next, based on the first first cycle's results, that the average scores was only 75.45 of the scores in the final test or test results, and the results of their active involvement or classroom atmosphere of 63.68. I went to the next, after revise the plan, not only the time but also the strategies, some steps that were changed from the activities in cycle 1 to the new ones in the cycle 2. Based on my my performance, my research or investigation in cycle 2 at that time, I got some results also. The results were dealing with two things. First, the students' scores. Yeah, the students' scores dealing with involvement, active involvement, and the student score dealing with the final test. At the time, the students got 82.54 of their scores in the second cycle, in this case the final test scores, and the active involvement, and it was categorized as good, yeah, and then they were at the time their average score, the average scores were 82, yeah, I mean more than 75. So there was a very significant improvement of the students' active or the students' success, whether dealing with scores or the final test or the test scores, or the students' scores dealing with their active involvement through observation activity by using observation sheets or observation checklist. From the first to the second, there was improvement. So it can be judged that the students was successful in their teaching in cycle 2, and the strategy was effective. Yeah, this judgment was based on what I have explained before, that their scores in cycle 1 only 75.45 of their scores in observation steps by using observation sheets contributed by the collaborative teacher, and their test scores was only 63.68 in cycle 1. It was improved, they got a very significant improve from 75.70 4.45 to 79.71% of their active involvement, and then the scores were improving from 63.68 to 82.54. It means that the strategy, the students were judged as successful in their teaching in the second cycle, and it was also judged that integrated strategy is successful, is very effective. Not only integrated strategy is not was but is, because it was successful at the time, and it is successful until now, because I always use it in my everyday teaching right now, and I can strongly judge that integrated strategy is very effective to improve students' speaking skills, not only speaking skills but also writing skills, listening skills, and speaking skills. I think that's my presentation of the results of my research in terms of integrated strategy by employing classroom action research at the State Islamic Institute of Ternate, North Maluku, Indonesia. Thank you for your
VFX
attention.
footage.